In the shadowed halls of Vane Manor, a widow's lies unravel a deadly mystery. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, arrives to face a chilling puzzle. Eleanor Vane, poisoned in a locked room. Her secrets exposed by menacing notes. You will pay for your lies. A falsified death certificate and a hidden affair point to a killer among her household. A resentful stepson, a desperate niece, a secretive housekeeper, or a blackmailed doctor. As Poirot's grey cells unravel the truth, betrayal and murder collide, revealing a legacy of guilt and redemption. Can he unlock the manor's secrets before another life is lost? Chapter 1. The unexpected summons. Hercule Poirot stood before the tall, gilded mirror in his London flat, his small, precise hands adjusting the impeccable symmetry of his moustache. The morning light streamed through the heavy damask curtains, casting a golden glow across the room, where every object from the polished mahogany desk to the neatly arranged bookshelves reflected his obsession with order. His valet, George, had laid out his morning suit with the precision of a military campaign, and Poirot's patent leather shoes gleamed as if they had been crafted that very day. It was a morning like any other, save for the letter that lay open on his desk, its contents as intriguing as they were enigmatic. The letter, written in a feminine hand on thick, cream-coloured stationery, bore the crest of Vane Manor, a secluded estate nestled in the rolling hills of Sussex. It was from Mrs. Eleanor Vane, a widow of considerable wealth and, if rumour were to be believed, a woman of considerable mystery. Her words were polite but urgent, requesting Poirot's immediate presence to address a delicate matter that required his unique discretion and intellect. The letter hinted at unease, perhaps even danger, but offered no specifics, only a plea for his assistance. Poirot's grey cells, those tireless engines of deduction, stirred at the challenge. A widow, a manor, a vague summons. This was precisely the sort of puzzle that appealed to his methodical mind. He folded the letter with care and tucked it into his pocket. His decision made. "George," he called, his voice crisp with purpose, "prepare my travelling case. I depart for Sussex within the hour." George, ever the model of efficiency, nodded and vanished to execute the order. Poirot permitted himself a small smile. The world, he thought, was never without its secrets. And he, Hercule Poirot, was never without the means to unravel them. The journey to Vane Manor was a study in contrasts. The train from London wound through the bustling outskirts of the city, before giving way to the serene, undulating countryside. Poirot, seated in a first-class compartment, observed the passing landscape with detached interest, his mind already sifting through the possibilities of Mrs. Vane's summons. Was it a matter of theft, blackmail, or something more sinister? The lack of detail in her letter suggested either fear or calculation, and Poirot was determined to discern which. Upon arriving at the small station of Ashford Vale, Poirot was met by a driver in a black Rolls-Royce, its polished exterior as imposing as the manor it served. The driver, a taciturn man with a face like weathered granite, spoke little, merely tipping his cap and opening the door. The drive to Vane Manor took them through narrow lanes lined with ancient oaks, their branches forming a canopy that dappled the sunlight. The manor itself loomed into view as they crested a sprawling edifice of grey stone, its towers and gables exuding an air of faded grandeur. Ivy clung to its walls, and the windows stared out like watchful eyes, guarding secrets Poirot was eager to uncover. The butler, a man named Hargreaves, greeted Poirot at the entrance with a bow so stiffly formal it might have been choreographed. His face, lined and expressionless, betrayed nothing, though his eyes flicked briefly over Poirot's immaculate attire, as if assessing whether this diminutive foreigner was worthy of the manor's attention. "Mrs. Vane awaits you in the drawing room, sir," Hargreaves intoned, leading the way through a cavernous hall adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Their painted gazes followed Poirot, their disapproval palpable, as if they resented his intrusion into their domain. The drawing room was a study in opulence, tempered by neglect. Heavy velvet drapes framed tall windows, their folds gathering dust at the edges. A grand chandelier hung overhead, its crystals dulled by time, and the furniture, though exquisite, bore the faint marks of wear. Mrs. Eleanor Vane stood by the fireplace, her slender figure clad in a black silk dress that spoke of mourning, though her husband had died years before. She was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a complexion that retained a youthful glow, marred only by the faint lines of worry around her mouth. Her smile, when she offered it, was nervous, almost brittle, as if it might shatter under scrutiny. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a gloved hand, "I cannot thank you enough for coming on such short notice." Her voice was low, with a tremor that suggested genuine unease, yet Poirot's keen senses detected a note of artifice, as if she were performing for an unseen audience. "Please, be seated. Would you care for tea?" Poirot declined with a polite wave, settling into a high-backed chair that creaked under his slight weight. "Madame, your letter spoke of a delicate matter. I am here to listen, and to assist, if it is within the power of Hercule Poirot to do so. Pray, tell me what troubles you." Mrs. Vane hesitated, her fingers twisting the lace handkerchief in her lap. "It is difficult to explain," she began, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting an interruption. "I have received a threat, Monsieur Poirot, a most disturbing threat." She reached into a small reticule and produced a crumpled piece of paper, which she handed to him with trembling fingers. Poirot smoothed the paper and examined it. The note was written in black ink, the handwriting crude and uneven, as if the writer had sought to disguise their hand. "You will pay for your lies." The words were stark, their menace unmistakable. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he studied the paper itself. Fine, expensive stationery, likely from the manor's own stock. A curious choice for a threatening missive. "When did you receive this, Madame?" he asked, his tone gentle but probing. "3 days ago," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was left on my dressing table, in my private chamber. No one but the household has access to that room, and you suspect someone within the manor." Poirot's question was direct, his gaze fixed on her face. Mrs. Vane's eyes widened, and she shook her head, perhaps too quickly. "I cannot say, Monsieur Poirot. I have no enemies, at least none I know of. But I am afraid, I feel watched, as if someone in this house wishes me harm." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. The widow's fear was convincing, yet there was something in her manner, a fleeting glance, a slight tightening of her lips that suggested she was withholding something. Was it guilt, shame, or merely the caution of a woman accustomed to guarding her secrets? His grey cells hummed with possibilities, but he needed more information. "Madame, if I am to help you, I must know the household, who resides here, and what is their relation to you?" Mrs. Vane nodded, composing herself. "Of course, there is my stepson, Gerald Vane, the son of my late husband, Reginald. Gerald is an artist, though his work is unconventional. He lives here, in the West Wing, but we are not close. Then there is my niece, Clara Merton, who came to live with me after her parents' death. She is a spirited girl, fond of society, but she can be impulsive. Dr. Simon Hurst, our family physician, also resides here, as his services are often needed. And Miss Lydia Crane, the housekeeper, has been with the family for decades. She is indispensable. Poirot noted the careful choice of words, the faint hesitation when she spoke of Gerald and Lydia. Each name added a piece to the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. And these are all who live here? He asked. Yes. Aside from the servants, Sargreaves, the butler, and a few maids and grounds. They are loyal, I assure you. Her assurance was too emphatic, Poirot thought, but he let it pass for now. Very well, madame. I shall require to meet each of them, and to inspect the premises, if I am to understand this threat. May I see the room where the note was found? Mrs. Vane agreed, leading him through a maze of corridors to her private chamber. The room was as grand as the rest of the manor, with a four-poster bed draped in crimson velvet, a marble-topped dressing table, and a tall window overlooking the gardens. Poirot examined the dressing table, noting the precise arrangement of combs, perfumes, and a silver-backed mirror. The note, she said, had been placed beneath the mirror, a spot only someone familiar with her habits would choose. He inspected the lock on the door sturdy, with no signs of tampering, and the window, which was bolted from the inside. The room offered no obvious clues, but Poirot's eyes lingered on a small writing desk in the corner. Do you keep your personal papers here, madame? He asked. Yes, but they are locked away, she replied, her tone defensive. Only I have the key. Poirot nodded, filing the information away. A locked desk, a threatening note, a widow with secrets the elements were aligning, but the motive remained elusive. He thanked Mrs. Vane and requested to meet the household. At dinner, to which she agreed, though her smile was strained as evening fell. Poirot prepared for dinner with the meticulous care he applied to all things. He chose a black dinner jacket, its lines as precise as his thoughts Da Vinci's, and ensured his tie was perfectly knotted. The dining room at Vane Manor was a cavernous space, its long table set with silver and crystal that gleamed under the flickering light of a chandelier. The atmosphere, however, was far from festive. The household gathered with varying degrees of reluctance, their faces a gallery of suppressed emotions. Gerald Vane, the stepson, was a tall, angular man in his 30s, with dark hair that fell untidily over his forehead, and eyes that burned with a quiet intensity. He carried a sketchbook under his arm, his fingers stained with charcoal, and his greeting to Poirot was curt, almost hostile. Clara Merton, by contrast, was a whirlwind of energy, her blonde curls bouncing as she spoke of London balls and Parisian fashion. Her laughter was bright but brittle, and her eyes darted to her aunt with a mix of affection and resentment. Dr. Simon Hurst was a man of middle age, his calm demeanour and measured speech suggesting a mind accustomed to control, though his fingers drummed a subtle rhythm on the table. Miss Dewey, the housekeeper, moved silently through the room, her severe black dress and pinched lips giving her the air of a governess, her eyes missing nothing. Dinner was a tense affair, the clink of silverware punctuating awkward silences. Gerald sketched absently on a napkin, his drawings dark and chaotic, often featuring a woman's face that bore a striking resemblance to Mrs. Vane, though distorted with anger or fear. Clara's chatter filled the silences, but her stories of society felt rehearsed, as if she were performing for an audience she did not trust. Dr. Hurst spoke sparingly. his comments confined to the weather or the quality of the wine, while Lydia Crane hovered at the edges, her presence a silent rebuke to the room's unease. Poirot observed them all, his mind cataloguing their gestures, their glances, their hesitations. Each had a reason to resent Mrs. Vanegerald for his disinherited fortune, Clara for her financial dependence, Hurst for rumours of his impending dismissal, and Lydia for years of unacknowledged service. The threatening note, Poirot suspected, was no idle prank. It was a declaration of intent. As the meal concluded, Mrs. Vane excused herself, citing a headache, her departure abrupt and unconvincing. Poirot lingered, his eyes sweeping the room. The note's crude handwriting suggested an attempt to conceal identity, but its fine paper pointed to someone within the manor's walls. The question was not only who, but why. What lie had Mrs. Vane told that warranted such venom? And was it the only lie she had told? Poirot retired to the guest room, a spacious chamber with heavy drapes and a fire crackling in the grate. He sat at a small writing desk, the threatening note before him, its words echoing in his mind. "You will pay for your lies." The plural intrigued. Him, lies, not lie. Was there more than one deception buried in Mrs. Vane's past? He opened his notebook, its pages crisp and orderly, and began to jot down his observations. The household was a web of motives, each resident a thread of resentment, ambition or desperation. Gerald's brooding anger, Clara's calculated charm, Hurst's guarded composure, Lydia's silent vigilance, all were pieces of a puzzle that Poirot's grey cells were already assembling. The manor itself seemed to whisper secrets. Its corridors echoed with the footsteps of generations, its walls heavy with the weight of history. Poirot sensed that the truth lay not only in the present, but in the past. In the shadows of Mrs. Vane's life before her widowhood, had she wronged someone deeply enough to provoke such a threat? Or was the note a diversion, a means to obscure a greater crime? He closed his notebook, his mind alive with possibilities. The night was still, save for the creak of the house settling, but Poirot knew that Vane Manor was anything but peaceful. Somewhere within its walls lay the truth, and he would find it, as surely as he adjusted his moustache each morning. The next day would bring new questions, new revelations. Poirot extinguished the lamp and settled into the unfamiliar bed, his mind racing. The widow who lied twice, perhaps more, had summoned him for a reason, and he would not rest until he uncovered it. The game, as his friend Hastings might say, was afoot. Chapter 2. The Household of Secrets. The morning after his arrival at Vane Manor, Hercule Poirot awoke to the soft patter of rain against the leaded windows of his guest room. The grey light filtering through the heavy drapes cast a sombre pall over the chamber, its oak-panelled walls and antique furnishings seeming to absorb the gloom. Poirot rose with his customary precision, his morning routine a ritual of order, a splash of cold water to the face, a meticulous shave, and the careful grooming of his moustache, each bristle aligned with mathematical exactitude. Dressed in a charcoal suit, its lines as sharp as his intellect, he descended to the dining room, where breakfast awaited and, he hoped, the first threads of the manor's secrets would begin to unravel. The dining room was less imposing in daylight, though no less tense. The long mahogany table was set for 5, with Mrs. Eleanor Vane at its head, her posture rigid despite the delicate porcelain cup in her hand. To her right sat Gerald Vane, his dark eyes fixed on a sketchbook, his fingers smudging charcoal across the page. Clara Merton, across from him, was a burst of colour in a yellow dress. her chatter about a recent London gala as relentless as the rain outside. Dr. Simon Hurst, seated beside her, sipped his coffee in silence, his calm demeanor betrayed by the faint tremor of his hand. Miss Lydia Crane, the housekeeper, did not join them at the table, but moved silently through the room, directing the maids with a glance as sharp as a blade. Poirot, seated at Mrs. Vane's left, observed them all, his grey cells cataloguing every gesture, every glance, every unspoken word. Madame Vane, Poirot began, his voice smooth as he buttered a slice of toast. I should like to meet each member of your household today, to better understand the circumstances of the threatening note. It is, perhaps, a small thing, but to Hercule Poirot, no detail is too small. Mrs. Vane's cup clinked against its saucer, her smile tight. Of course, Monsieur Poirot, I have instructed everyone to make themselves available, but I must warn you, my household is complicated. We are not a family bound by warmth. Gerald snorted, not looking up from his sketch. That's one way to put it, he muttered, his voice low but cutting. Clara's laughter faltered, and Dr. Hurst's fingers tightened around his cup. Lydia, arranging a vase of roses at the sideboard, paused, her expression unreadable. Poirot noted the undercurrents, the unspoken resentments that rippled through the room like a chill draught. Complicated, madame. Poirot tilted his head, his eyes bright with curiosity. Perhaps you might elaborate. The dynamics of a household often reveal much about its secrets. Mrs. Vane hesitated, her gaze flickering to Gerald, then away. Gerald is my late husband's son from his first marriage. He has artistic ambitions, which I support, though he finds my involvement intrusive. Clara, my niece, has lived with me since she was orphaned at 16. She is dear to me, but her tastes are extravagant, and I fear I cannot always indulge them. Dr. Hurst has been our physician for years, a trusted friend, though I sense he grows weary of country life. And Lydia Miss Crane has served this family since before I arrived. Her loyalty is unquestioned. Unquestioned by you, perhaps, Gerald said, his pencil scratching fiercely across the page. Some of us see things differently. Gerald, please, Mrs. Vane said sharply, her cheeks flushing. This is neither the time nor the place. Poirot's smile was benign, but his mind was alight. Gerald's hostility was palpable, Clara's forced gaiety a mask, Hurst's silence a shield, and Lydia's vigilance a mystery. Each was a piece of the puzzle, and the threatening note "you will pay for your lies" was the key. He resolved to speak with each privately, to probe the cracks in their facades. After breakfast, Poirot began his interviews in the library, a vast room lined with leather-bound volumes and dominated by a marble fireplace. The air smelled of old paper and wax polish, and the rain's steady rhythm provided a somber backdrop. He requested Gerald first, sensing the young man's volatility might yield early insights. Gerald slouched into the room, his sketchbook tucked under his arm, his dark hair falling into his eyes. He wore a threadbare jacket, its cuffs frayed, a stark contrast to the manor's opulence. Let's make this quick, he said, dropping into a chair. I've got work to do. Monsieur Vane, Poirot said, his tone polite but firm. I am here to investigate a threat against your stepmother. The note suggests a grievance, perhaps a personal one. Have you any knowledge of who might wish her harm? Gerald's laugh was bitter. Half the county, if you believe the gossip. Eleanor's got a knack for making enemies, even if she plays the saint. But I didn't write that note, if that's what you're getting at. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. And yet, you resent her, Nan. She controls the estate, the fortune that was your father's. That must sting for an artist who struggles to sell his work. Gerald's jaw tightened, his fingers smudging the page he held. She's bled the estate dry with her charities and her parties. My father built Vane Manor into something grand, and she's turned it into her personal stage. But I don't sneak around leaving notes. If I've got something to say, I say it. And what do you say, monsieur? Poirot pressed. What is it that Madame Vane has done to earn such disdain? Gerald hesitated, his eyes narrowing. Ask her about my father's will. Ask her why I'm living like a pauper in my own home. That's all I'll say. He stood abruptly, clutching his sketchbook, and left without another word. Poirot made a note in his small black book. Geraldanger a possible motive, but lacks subtlety for note. He next summoned Clara Merton, who entered the library with a bright smile and a swirl of perfume. Her yellow dress a defiant splash of colour against the room's muted tones. Monsieur Poirot, what? A thrill to have a detective in the house, she exclaimed, settling into the chair with a theatrical flourish. It's like something out of a novel. Do tell me, do you think we're all suspects? Poirot's smile was indulgent. Mademoiselle, in a house such as this, everyone is a suspect until proven otherwise. The note speaks of lies. Have you any knowledge of such lies, or of who might wish to threaten your aunt? Clara's laugh was light, but her eyes darted to the door. Aunt Eleanor. Oh, she's far too proper for lies. She's all charity and good deeds, you know. As for the note, it's probably some servant's idea of a joke. People get bored in the country, indeed. Poirot tilted his head. And yet, you live here, dependent on your aunt's generosity. That must be trying for a young woman who loves the excitement of London. Clara's smile faltered, her fingers twisting a strand of her hair. Aunt Eleanor's been kind. But yes, it's dull here. I'd rather be in town, but she insists I stay. Says it's for my own good. As for enemies, I can't imagine who'd bother with a note when they could just gossip behind her back. Poirot noted the deflection, the quick shift from candour to flippancy. Clara knew more than she admitted, but her youth and impulsiveness suggested she lacked the cunning for a calculated threat. He dismissed her with a nod, jotting in his notebook, Clara evasive, possibly resentful of dependence. Unlikely author of note, Dr. Simon Hurst entered next, his movements measured, his face a mask of professional calm. He was a man in his early 50s, with greying hair and eyes that seemed to see through rather than at his interlocutor. He sat stiffly, his hands folded in his lap, as if awaiting a diagnosis. Dr. Hurst, Poirot began. You are a man of science, accustomed to observation. Have you observed anything in this household that might explain the threatening note? Hurst's lips twitched, not quite a smile. I observe much, Monsieur Poirot, but little of it is relevant. Mrs. Vane is a complex woman, generous but guarded. The note. It could be a prank, or perhaps a disgruntled servant. I've seen no evidence of serious malice. And yet, you live here, in close proximity to the family, Poirot said, his tone mild. You must hear things, see things. There are rumours, Doctor, that Madame Vane plans to replace you with a younger physician. That must cause unease. Hurst's composure held, but his fingers tightened briefly. Rumours are the currency of small minds. I serve this family to the best of my ability. If Mrs. Vane wishes to replace me, that is her prerogative. I have no quarrel with her. Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Hurst's face. The doctor's calm was too perfect, too practiced. He wrote, Hurst controlled, possibly hiding resentment, knowledge of household dynamics. Hurst left with a polite nod, his footsteps echoing in the quiet library. Finally, Poirot requested Lydia Crane. The housekeeper entered with the air of a woman who had seen too much and said too little. Her black dress was immaculate, her grey hair pulled tightly into a bun, and her eyes were sharp, assessing Poirot as if he were a stain to be scrubbed away. Miss Crane, Poirot said, gesturing to the chair, you have served the Vane family for many years. You must know its secrets, its tensions. The note speaks of lies. What lies might Madame Vane have told that would provoke such a threat? Lydia's lips thinned, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I don't deal in gossip, sir. My job is to keep this house running, not to pry into its affairs. The note is nonsense, likely some childish spite. Mrs. Vane is a good woman. Whatever others say, others. Poirot's eyebrow arched. Who speaks ill of her, and why? Lydia's gaze hardened. People talk. Servants, villagers, even family. They say she's too fond of her charities, that she neglects the manor, but I've seen worse mistresses. She's fair, and that's enough. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. And yet, Miss Crane, you see everything. A housekeeper is the eyes and ears of a house. Have you seen nothing unusual? No hint of who might have written that note? Lydia's eyes met his, unyielding. I see what needs seeing, and I say what needs saying. There's nothing more to tell. She rose, her movements brisk, and left the room, her silence louder than any confession. Poirot sat back, his notebook open before him. Each interview had revealed a facet of the household's discord. Gerald's anger, Clara's restlessness, Hurst's guardedness, Lydia's reticence. The note was no prank. It was a spark in a tinderbox of resentments. But whose hand had struck the match? And what lies did it refer to? He rose and approached the window, the rain now a steady drumbeat. The manor's grounds stretched into the mist, the gardens meticulously tended, the paths winding into shadow. Poirot's mind turned to Mrs. Vane herself. Her fear had seemed genuine, but her eyes had betrayed a secret, a flicker of guilt that suggested she knew more about the note than she admitted. Was she the victim, or was she playing a deeper game? He returned to his notebook, adding a final note. Mrs. Vane conceals something. The lies are hers, but whose vengeance? The household of secrets was a labyrinth, and Poirot was only at its entrance. The day's interviews had given him threads to follow, but the truth lay deeper in the shadows of Vane Manor's past. He closed the notebook, his grey cells humming. The evening would bring dinner, another chance to observe, to probe, to uncover the truth behind the widow who lied twice. Chapter 3. The first lie uncovered. The rain had ceased by mid-morning, leaving Vane Manor shrouded in a damp mist that clung to its stone walls like a second skin. Hercule Poirot stood at the window of the library, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes tracing the outlines of the manicured gardens below. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and fading roses, a fitting backdrop for the undercurrents of deceit that permeated the household. His interviews the previous day had painted a picture of a family bound by resentment and secrets, each member a potential author of the threatening note. You will pay for your lies. Yet it was Mrs. Eleanor Vane's guarded demeanour that lingered. In his mind, her nervous glances betraying a truth she dared not speak. Poirot's grey cells, ever restless, churned with the certainty that the widow herself held the key to the mystery. He turned from the window, his polished shoes clicking on the parquet floor as he crossed to the desk where he had left the threatening note. The crude handwriting, the fine stationery, the stark words, they were a riddle in themselves. The paper was of the same quality used in Mrs. Vane's private correspondence, a detail that suggested intimacy with the manor's inner workings. Poirot suspected the note was no mere jest. It was a declaration, a warning rooted in a past betrayal. But whose betrayal, and what lie? His first task was to examine the scene of the note's discovery more thoroughly. He requested Mrs. Vane's permission to revisit her private chamber, and she agreed, though her reluctance was palpable. She led him through the manor's labyrinthine corridors, her black silk dress whispering against the polished floors. The chamber was, as he remembered, a sanctuary of crimson and gold, its four-poster bed dominating the space, its dressing table a shrine to feminine ritual. The window, still, bolted, overlooked the misty gardens, and the door's lock showed no signs of tampering. Poirot's eyes, however, were drawn to the writing desk in the corner, its surface too orderly, as if arranged to deflect scrutiny. "Madame," Hugh said, his voice gentle but probing, "you are certain the note was found on your dressing table?" Beneath the mirror, Mrs. Vane nodded, her hands twisting her lace handkerchief. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. I found it 3 mornings ago, just as I said. It was unsettling, to say the least." Poirot approached the dressing table, his fingers brushing the silver-backed mirror, the crystal perfume bottles, the ivory comb. Everything was in its place, yet the precision felt staged. He turned to the writing desk, noting its locked drawer. "And this desk, Madame. You keep your personal papers here, Nan?" "Yes," she replied, her voice tight. "But as I told you, the key is with me always. No one else has access." Poirot's smile was disarming. "And yet, Madame, a locked desk is only as secure as the one who holds the key. May I examine it?" Mrs. Vane hesitated, her eyes flickering with something akin to fear. But she produced a small key from her reticule and unlocked the drawer, stepping back as Poirot opened it. Inside were neatly arranged letters, a ledger, and a few legal documents, all in her meticulous hand. But tucked beneath a stack of envelopes was another note, its paper identical to the first. Poirot unfolded it with care, his heart quickening, as he read the words, scrawled in the same crude hand. "Your first lie will not save you." He held the note aloft, his gaze fixed on Mrs. Vane. "Madame, you did not mention a second note. This is most curious, is it not? When did you receive this?" Mrs. Vane's face paled, her hand rising to her throat. I found it yesterday, after your arrival. I didn't think it important. I was already so frightened, and I thought you thought to conceal it from Hercule Poirot." His tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. "Madame, the truth is the only path to safety. This note speaks of a first lie. What lie is this, and why do you fear to speak of it?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She sank into a chair, her composure crumbling. "I don't know what they mean," she whispered. "I have no enemies, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it." Poirot's grey cells hummed. The widow's denial was too fervent, her fear too theatrical. She was hiding something, a lie, perhaps, that had sparked this vendetta. He folded the second note and placed it in his pocket alongside the first, resolving to compare them later. "Very well, Madame, but I must ask you to be frank with me henceforth. The lies of which these notes speak, they are yours, are they not?" Mrs. Vane's eyes widened, but she shook her head. I have done nothing to deserve this. Nothing. Poirot dismissed her gently, his mind racing. The second note confirmed his suspicion. The threat was personal, rooted in a specific deception. The phrase first lie implied there was more than one, and Mrs. Vane's evasiveness suggested she knew what they were. He spent the next hour examining the room, his fingers tracing the edges of furniture, his eyes scanning for anomalies. The desk yielded no further clues, but a faint scratch on the lock suggested it had been tampered with, though not recently. Someone in the household had access, or had once had access, to Mrs. Vane's private papers. But who? He returned to the library, where he requested the presence of Mr. Travers, the family solicitor, whom Mrs. Vane had mentioned in passing. Travers arrived by noon, a wiry man with spectacles perched on a sharp nose, his briefcase bulging with documents. He greeted Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and caution, clearly unused to being summoned by a detective. Monsieur Travers. Poirot began, seating himself behind the library desk. You have managed the Vane family's affairs for many years, I presume. I am investigating a threat against Madame Vane, and I require information about her past, her marriage, her finances, her relationships. What can you tell me? Travers adjusted his spectacles, his fingers tapping the briefcase. Mrs. Vane is a client of long standing, Monsieur Poirot. Her late husband, Reginald Vane, left her a considerable fortune, though much of it is tied up in trusts and investments. She is a generous woman, perhaps too generous, with her charitable endeavors, but I know of no scandal, no reason for threats. Poirot's eyebrow arched. And yet, monsieur, the notes speak of lies. Lies that Madame Vane has told. Have you any knowledge of such deceptions, perhaps in the handling of her husband's estate? Travers stiffened, his lips pursing. I assure you, all legal matters were handled with the utmost propriety. Reginald Vane's will was clear. The bulk of his estate went to Eleanor, with provisions for his son, Gerald, and certain charities. There was some discontent from Gerald, who felt his inheritance inadequate, but that is hardly unusual in such families. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. And were there any irregularities, monsieur? Any documents? Perhaps that raised questions. Travers hesitated, his fingers tightening on his briefcase. There was one matter, he admitted reluctantly. Some years ago, shortly after Reginald's death, I received a query from a private investigator hired by a distant relative. They questioned the authenticity of Reginald's death certificate, suggesting it had been issued prematurely. But the matter was resolved. The certificate was verified, and the estate passed to Mrs. Vane without issue. Poirot's grey cells sparked. A falsified death certificate. This was the first lie, or at least a strong candidate. Had Mrs. Vane declared her husband dead before his time to secure his fortune? And if so, who had uncovered this deception? This investigator, Poirot said. What was their name, and what became of their inquiry? Travers opened his briefcase and riffled through his papers, producing a faded letter. A Mr. Harold Grayson, based in London. His inquiry was brief, and he withdrew it after receiving confirmation from the coroner's office. I have no further details. Poirot took the letter, noting Grayson's address. Merci, Monsieur Travers. This is most helpful. One final question. Has Madame Vane made any recent changes to her will? Travers nodded. Yes, she altered. It's 6 months ago, directing a significant portion of her estate to a charity for orphaned children. Gerald and Clara were displeased, as it reduced their expected inheritances. but the will is legally sound. Poirot dismissed Travers with thanks, his mind alight with new possibilities. The falsified death certificate was a lie of magnitude, one that could explain the threatening notes. If Mrs. Vane had manipulated her husband's death to claim his wealth, someone, perhaps Gerald, perhaps another, had discovered it. But why threaten her now, years later? And what was the second lie hinted at in the notes? He spent the afternoon analyzing the two notes, comparing their handwriting under a magnifying glass. The strokes were identical, the ink the same deep black, suggesting a single author. Yet the deliberate crudeness of the script pointed to someone educated, someone accustomed to finer penmanship who sought to disguise their hand. The stationery, too, was a clue available only to those with access to Mrs. Vane's private quarters or the Manor's writing room. The circle of suspects remained narrow: Gerald, Clara, Hurst, Lydia, or perhaps a servant with a hidden grudge. As evening approached, Poirot requested a tour of the Manor's less public spaces, the servants' quarters, the attic, the cellars. Hargreaves, the butler, led him through the warren of narrow passages and creaking staircases, his demeanor as impassive as ever. The servants' quarters were Spartan but orderly, revealing nothing of note. The attic, however, held a surprise: a locked trunk bearing the initials of Via Reginald Vane. Poirot requested it be opened, but Hargreaves claimed no key existed. Undeterred, Poirot made a mental note to return with a locksmith, suspecting the trunk might hold documents related to Reginald's death. The cellars were damp and shadowy, their stone walls lined with racks of wine and dusty crates. Poirot's keen eyes spotted a small, locked box tucked behind a barrel, its surface engraved with a floral pattern. Hargreaves, when questioned, claimed ignorance, but his hesitation suggested otherwise. Poirot resolved to investigate further, sensing the box might contain evidence of Mrs. Vane's past. Dinner that evening was a mirror of the previous night's tension, though the atmosphere was heavier, as if the household sensed Poirot's progress. Gerald's sketches grew darker, his pencil slashing across the page with barely concealed anger. Clara's chatter was subdued, her eyes flitting to her aunt with a mix of fear and defiance. Dr. Hurst maintained his calm facade, but his fingers drummed a restless rhythm. Lydia moved silently, her presence a shadow that seemed to darken the room. Mrs. Vane, pale and withdrawn, excused herself early, claiming fatigue. Poirot lingered after dinner, his mind turning over the day's discoveries. The falsified death certificate was the first lie, a deception that had enriched Mrs. Vane but alienated her stepson and perhaps others. The second note, hidden in her desk, suggested she knew of the threat's significance but feared to reveal it. Was she protecting someone, or herself? And who in this household had the cunning to craft such a threat? He retired to his room, his notebook open before him. The entries were precise, each observation a step toward the truth. Mrs. Vanconseal's knowledge of lies, likely related to husband's death. Gerald motive in disinheritance, but too impulsive for notes. Clara resentful, but lacks guile. Hurst knowledge of family secrets, possible access to desk. Lydia sees all, says nothing. The box in the cellar key to past. The Manor was a house of secrets, and Poirot was determined to uncover them all. The first lie had been revealed, but the second remained elusive, and with it, the identity of the threat's author. The night closed around Vane Manor, its silence heavy with unspoken truths, and Poirot knew the morning would bring new challenges to his grey cells. Chapter 4. A death in the night. The night enveloped Vane Manor in a shroud of stillness, broken only by the occasional creak of ancient timbers settling in the damp Sussex air. Hercule Poirot, unable to sleep, sat at the small writing desk in his guest room, his notebook open before him. The two threatening notes: "You will pay for your lies," and "Your first lie will not save you," laid out like pieces of a grim puzzle. The discovery of the falsified death certificate, hinted at by Mr. Travers, had confirmed Mrs. Eleanor Vane's first lie. She had declared her husband Reginald dead prematurely, securing his fortune for herself. But the second lie, and the identity of the note's author, remained elusive. Poirot's grey cells churned, sensing that the manor's secrets were on the verge of unraveling. A scream shattered the silence, piercing the walls of his room like a blade. Poirot sprang to his feet, his heart quickening, and seized his dressing gown, slipping it over his immaculate pyjamas. The scream had come from the eastern wing, where Mrs. Vane's chamber lay. He hurried through the darkened corridors, his patent leather slippers silent on the polished floors, guided by the flickering light of wall sconces. The household was stirring. Doors creaked open, voices murmured in alarm, but Poirot reached Mrs. Vane's chamber first. The door was locked, the heavy oak unyielding under his touch. He rapped sharply, calling, "Madame Vane, it is Poirot. Open the door." No response came, only a faint, ominous silence. Gerald Vane appeared, his hair dishevelled, his eyes wild with something that might have been fear or guilt. Clara Merton followed, her nightgown hastily covered by a shawl, her face pale. Dr. Simon Hurst arrived moments later, his medical bag in hand, his composure intact but strained. Lydia Crane, the housekeeper, was last, her severe expression softened by a rare flicker of concern. "The key, quickly," Poirot demanded. Lydia produced a master key from her apron, her hands steady despite the tension. The lock clicked, and Poirot pushed the door open, revealing a scene that froze the breath in his lungs. Mrs. Eleanor Vane lay crumpled on the floor beside her bed, her black silk nightdress fanned out like spilled ink. A wineglass had fallen from her hand, its contents staining the Persian rug a deep crimson. Her face was contorted, her eyes wide with a final, unspoken terror. Poirot knelt beside her, his fingers brushing her wrist for a pulse, though he knew it was futile. The faint, bitter scent of almonds hung in the air, unmistakable to his trained senses. "Poison," Poirot murmured, his voice steady despite the horror. "Cyanide, I suspect." Dr. Hurst pushed forward, kneeling to examine the body. "She's gone," he confirmed, his tone clinical but strained. "The symptoms: convulsions, the smell of almonds point to cyanide poisoning. Death would have been swift." Clara stifled a sob, clutching her shawl, while Gerald stood rigid, his hands clenched into fists. Lydia's lips moved silently, as if in prayer, her eyes fixed on her mistress. Poirot rose, his gaze sweeping the room. The window was bolted from the inside, the curtains undisturbed. The door, locked until moments ago, showed no signs of tampering. The wineglass, its contents spilled, bore Mrs. Vane's fingerprints alone, as a cursory examination confirmed. A half-empty decanter of wine stood on the bedside table, its crystal catching the lamplight. "Monsieur Hurst," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the room's tension. "When did you last see Madame Vane?" Hurst straightened, his face a mask of calm. "At dinner, as you did. She retired early, claiming a headache. I had no further contact with her. And you, Mademoiselle Merton?" Poirot turned to Clara, whose eyes were red-rimmed, though whether from tears or sleeplessness, he could not tell. I saw her in the corridor after dinner," Clara stammered. "She seemed upset, but she wouldn't talk to me. I went to my room and stayed there." Gerald's voice was sharp. "I didn't see her after dinner. I was in my studio, working. You can check my sketches if you don't believe me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you, Miss Crane, a housekeeper sees all, does she not?" Lydia's gaze met his, unyielding. "I brought her the wine, as I do every evening. She was alive when I left her, locking the door behind me. That was at 9 o'clock. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A locked room, a poisoned glass, a dead widow. The puzzle was now a murder. He requested Hargreaves, the butler, to summon the local police, emphasizing the need for discretion until their arrival. In the meantime, he secured the room, forbidding anyone to touch the body or the wineglass. His grey cells were alight with questions. How had the poison been administered? Who had access to the room? And why now, when Poirot was on the verge of uncovering the widow's secrets? He examined the decanter, sniffing its contents cautiously. The faint almond scent was present, suggesting the poison had been added to the wine before it reached Mrs. Vane's glass. But Lydia's claim of delivering the wine herself raised a troubling possibility. Had the housekeeper, with her unparalleled access, tampered with it? Or was the poison introduced earlier, perhaps at dinner, where the decanter had stood on the sideboard? Poirot turned his attention to the room itself. The dressing table was undisturbed, its mirror reflecting the grim scene. The writing desk, however, drew his eye. The drawer, previously locked, was now slightly ajar, as if someone had rifled through it in haste. He opened it, finding the same papers he had seen earlier, but a small envelope was missing, one he had noted for its official seal. Had Mrs. Vane removed it, or had someone else entered the room before her death? He questioned the household again, their answers tinged with shock and suspicion. Clara admitted to lingering near her aunt's door, hoping to discuss her allowance, but insisted she had not entered. Gerald's alibi of working in his studio was unverifiable, though Poirot noted a fresh sketch in his book, dated that evening, depicting a woman's face twisted in agony, a chilling echo of Mrs. Vane's final expression. Hurst reiterated his distance, claiming he had retired to his room to read medical journals. Lydia's account remained consistent, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease when Poirot mentioned the Deccan. As dawn broke, the police arrived. A local inspector named Carver, a stout man with a skeptical gaze, accompanied by a constable. Poirot briefed them concisely, emphasizing the locked room and the cyanide. Carver, though initially dismissive of the fancy foreigner, listened with growing respect as Poirot outlined the facts, the threatening notes, the falsified death certificate, the tensions within the household. The inspector ordered the body removed for autopsy and the wineglass and decanter seized for analysis, promising results within the day. Poirot, however, did not wait. He returned to the dining room, where the decanter had been filled the previous evening. A quick test with a chemical strip from his portable kit. Poirot was never without such tools confirmed cyanide in the remaining wine. The poison had been added before the decanter reached Mrs. Vane's room, narrowing the window of opportunity. Only someone with access to the dining room or the cellar, where the wine was stored, could have tampered with it. He summoned Hargreaves, whose impassive face betrayed nothing. Monsieur Hargreaves, who handled the wine before it was served last evening. The butler's voice was measured. "I decanted it myself, sir, from a bottle in the cellar." Miss Crane took it to Mrs. Vane's room, as was her custom. No one else touched it, to my knowledge, and the cellar, it is secure. Locked, sir. Only Miss Crane and I have keys. Poirot's grey cells hummed. The cellar, with its mysterious locked box, was a thread to pursue. He requested to revisit it, and Hargreaves led him down the stone steps, the air growing colder and damper with each descent. The box, still tucked behind a barrel, was undisturbed, but Poirot's attempt to open it was thwarted by its sturdy lock. He instructed Hargreaves to fetch a locksmith, determined to uncover its contents. Back in the library, Poirot reviewed his notes. The locked room was a misdirection. The poison had been in the decanter, not the glass, meaning the murderer needed only access to the dining room or cellar. Gerald's sketches suggested a morbid fascination with his stepmother's fate, but his impulsiveness made him an unlikely candidate for such a calculated crime. Clara's emotional volatility pointed to desperation, not cunning. Hurst's medical expertise made him a prime suspect, with access to cyanide and knowledge of its effects. Lydia, with her keys and silent vigilance, could not be dismissed. And then there was the missing envelope from the desk. Had Mrs. Vane hidden it, or had the murderer taken it to conceal a clue? As the household gathered for a sombre luncheon, Poirot observed their strained faces. Gerald's hands trembled as he sketched. Clara's eyes were swollen with unshed tears. Hurst's calm was a brittle veneer, and Lydia's movements were mechanical, as if she were distancing herself from the tragedy. The inspector's men were still combing the manor, but Poirot knew the truth lay in the interplay of motives and opportunities. He closed his notebook, his mind alight with the certainty that Mrs. Vane's death was no accident. The first lie, her falsified death certificate, had sparked resentment, but the second lie, still hidden, had driven someone to murder. The locked room, the cyanide, the notes, all were pieces of a puzzle that Poirot's grey cells were assembling with relentless precision. The night had claimed a life, but the day would bring answers, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the widow's secrets were laid bare. Chapter 5. The second lie revealed the morning after Mrs. Eleanor Vane's death. Vane Manor seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with grief and suspicion. The rain had returned, a relentless drizzle that blurred the windows and cast a grey veil over the estate. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small, precise figure dwarfed by the towering bookshelves, his notebook open on the desk before him. The murder of Mrs. Vane, poisoned by cyanide, in a locked room, had transformed the threatening notes from a puzzle into a prelude to tragedy. The first lie, the falsified death certificate of Reginald Vane, had been uncovered, but the second, notes reference to your first lie, implied another deception, one that had driven someone to kill. Poirot's grey cells were alight, sifting through the household's motives and secrets. Determined to uncover the truth, the police, led by Inspector Carver, had sealed Mrs. Vane's chamber and taken the wine-glass and decanter for analysis. The autopsy, Carver informed Poirot, had confirmed cyanide as the cause of death, with traces found in the decanter's remaining wine. The locked room remained a conundrum. The door had been secured from the inside, the window bolted, and no one had entered after Lydia Crane delivered the wine at 9 o'clock. Yet the missing envelope from Mrs. Vane's desk nagged at Poirot. Clue, perhaps, to the second lie that had cost her life. Poirot requested the return of Mr. Travers, the family solicitor, who arrived promptly, his wiry frame hunched against the rain. His spectacles glinted as he settled into a chair, his briefcase clutched like a shield. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with unease. "This is a dreadful business. Mrs. Vane's death such a shock. How may I assist?" "You, Monsieur Travers," Poirot began, his tone measured. "You have provided valuable insight into Madame Vane's first lither, questionable death certificate of her husband. But I suspect another deception, one that may have provoked her. Murder. Tell me, what do you know of her personal affairs, beyond the will and the estate?" Travers shifted, his fingers tapping nervously. "Mrs. Vane was a private woman, Monsieur Poirot. Her financial dealings were meticulous, her charitable contributions generous. I know of no scandals, though her decision to redirect the estate to charity caused friction with Gerald and Clara." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And her correspondence? You mentioned a private investigator, Harold Grayson, who questioned the death certificate. Were there other such inquiries, perhaps letters or documents she kept hidden?" Travers hesitated, then opened his briefcase, producing a slim file. "There is one matter I withheld yesterday, out of respect for Mrs. Vane's privacy. A year ago, I received a letter from Grayson, not about the death certificate, but about a personal matter. He claimed to have evidence of an indiscretion in Mrs. Vane's past, something she wished to keep buried. She instructed me to pay him off, and I did. The matter was closed." Poirot leaned forward, his grey cells sparking. "An indiscretion, monsieur? Of what nature?" Travers flushed, his voice dropping. "Grayson hinted at an affair before her marriage to Reginald Vane. He had letters, allegedly from Mrs. Vane, to a man whose identity he did not disclose. She paid to ensure their destruction. I assumed it was a youthful folly, nothing more." Mind raced. An affair, a second lie, concealed to protect her reputation and her marriage. Had someone in the household discovered it, using it to fuel their resentment? "These letters," he said, "were they destroyed, as Grayson claimed?" "I have no proof," Travers admitted. "Mrs. Vane believed so, but Grayson was not a man to inspire trust. I advised her to verify, but she refused, saying it was behind her." Poirot made a mental note to trace Grayson, suspecting the investigator's role was not as concluded as Travers believed. "And the will, monsieur? You mentioned changes. Were there other documents, perhaps related to this affair, that Mrs. Vane kept?" Travers produced a copy of the will, its pages crisp with legal precision. "This is the most recent version, signed 6 months ago. The bulk of the estate goes to the Orphans' Fund, with modest provisions for Gerald and Clara. But there was a codicil added last month, restoring a small sum to each. Mrs. Vane said it was to ease their discontent, though they remained unaware of it." Poirot examined the will, noting its clarity and Mrs. Vane's signature, steady despite her recent fears. The codicil suggested guilt, perhaps an attempt to atone for her lies. But the missing envelope from her desk, could it have contained Grayson's letters or evidence of the affair? He thanked Travers, who left with a promise to provide Grayson's last known address. Poirot turned his attention to the household, requesting private interviews to probe their reactions to the murder. Gerald was first, entering the library with a scowl, his sketchbook clutched tightly. His charcoal-stained fingers betrayed his agitation, and his eyes, red-rimmed, suggested a sleepless night. "Monsieur Vane," Poirot said, his voice calm but piercing, "your stepmother is dead, poisoned, in a locked room. The note spoke of her lies. Do you know of an affair in her past? Something that might have provoked such hatred?" Gerald's laugh was harsh, his hands gripping the sketchbook. "An affair, that's rich. Eleanor played the grieving widow, but she was no saint. If she had a lover, it wouldn't surprise me. She was always scheming, keeping secrets, but I didn't kill her. I hated her, sure, but I didn't need poison to make her pay. And your sketches? Poirot gestured to the book. They depict her in distress. Nan. A curious choice for an innocent man. Gerald flushed, opening the sketchbook to reveal a drawing of Mrs. Vane, her face twisted in fear. It's art, not a confession. I draw what I feel. She ruined my life, cutting me out of my father's estate, but I didn't sneak into her room with cyanide. Poirot noted the passion in Gerald's voice, the raw edge of his anger. He was capable of resentment, perhaps even violence, but the locked room murder required a subtler mind. Poirot dismissed him, writing, "Gerald motive strong, but lacks finesse for poison. Knows of lies." Clara Merton entered next, her usual vivacity dimmed, her eyes swollen from crying. She wore a grey dress, its sombre hue a stark contrast to her usual brightness. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "this is awful. Aunt Eleanor Shea didn't deserve this. Who could do such a thing?" Mademoiselle Poirot said gently, "You were close to your aunt, yet you resented her control over your finances. The notes spoke of lies. Did she confide in you about an affair, perhaps one that shamed her?" Clara's eyes widened, her hands twisting her handkerchief. "An affair? No, she never said anything like that. Aunt Eleanor was proper, always. Proper, but she was secretive. She'd lock herself in her room, writing letters, burning papers. I thought it was about money, not that." Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was sharp. "And last night, mademoiselle, you lingered near her door. Did you hear anything? See anything?" Clara hesitated, her cheeks flushing. "I wanted to talk to her, to ask for my allowance. She was upset, muttering about someone watching her. I heard her lock the door, and I left. That's all." Poirot noted her evasiveness, her quick glance away. She knew something, perhaps not the full truth, but enough to be afraid. He wrote, "Claire emotional, possibly aware of secrets. Unlikely. Murderer, but hiding something." Dr. Simon Hurst was next, his calm demeanor strained, his hands clasped tightly. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "this is a tragedy. I did all I could to confirm the cause of death, but I'm no detective. How can I help?" "You are a man of science," Dr. Poirot said, his eyes piercing. "Cyanide is a poison you would recognize. Did Madame Vane ever speak to you of an affair, a secret that might have led to her death?" Hurst's face remained impassive, but his fingers twitched. "An affair? No, she never mentioned such a thing. Our conversations were professional, her health, her charities. As for cyanide, it's not uncommon in medical circles, but I keep none in my bag. I had no reason to harm her." Poirot's smile was thin. "And yet, you were in the dining room late last night, near the decanter. Miss Crane saw you. Can you explain?" Hurst's composure faltered, his eyes narrowing. "I was checking the household, ensuring all was secure. Mrs. Vane had been anxious, and I thought it prudent. I didn't touch the wine." Poirot nodded, his suspicions deepening. Hurst's expertise and access made him a prime candidate, but his denial was too smooth. He wrote, "Hurst possible access to cyanide, motive unclear." Lies about dining room, finally. Lydia Crane entered, her severe expression softened by fatigue. She stood rather than sat, her hands clasped before her. "Miss Crane," Poirot said, "you delivered the wine to Madame Vane. Did you notice anything unusual? Her manner, the decanter, anything? Lydia's lips thinned. She was nervous, as she had been for days. The decanter was as I left it in the dining room. I poured her glass, locked the door, and left. I know nothing of poison. And her secrets, Poirot pressed. You have served this family for decades. Did she ever speak of an affair, eh? Past that haunted her. Lydia's eyes met his, cold and unyielding. Mrs. Vane was my mistress, not my confidant. I don't pry into private matters. If she had secrets, she kept them to herself. Poirot sensed her reticence, her loyalty a barrier he could not yet breach. He wrote, Lydia access to wine, fiercely loyal. Knows more than she admits. As she left, he turned to the notes, comparing them again. The phrase, your first lie, echoed in his mind. The affair was the second lie, a scandal Mrs. Vane had paid to bury. But someone had unearthed it, and with it, her life had ended. He visited the cellar again, the locksmith having arrived to open the mysterious box. Inside were letters, yellowed with age, addressed to a Dr. S.H., in Mrs. Vane's hand, their tone intimate, even passionate. They confirmed the affair with Hurst, predating her marriage to Reginald. Had Hurst known of these letters, or had someone else found them, using them to blackmail or punish her? Poirot closed his notebook, the pieces falling into place. The first lie, Reginald's death certificate, had enriched Mrs. Vane. The second, her affair with Hurst, had threatened her reputation. The notes and the murder were linked to these deceptions, but the murderer's identity remained elusive. The household was a cauldron of motives, and Poirot's grey cells were poised to distill the truth from its shadows. Chapter 6. The alibi that crumbled. The drizzle had thickened into a steady rain by the afternoon, cloaking Vane Manor in a grey shroud that seemed to mirror the mounting tension within its walls. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small frame silhouetted against the tall windows, his notebook a constant companion as he pieced together the fragments of the murder of Mrs. Eleanor Vane, the cyanide in the decanter, the locked room, the threatening notes, and now the revelation of two lies her falsified death certificate for her husband Reginald, and her concealed affair with Dr. Simon Hurst, had woven a tapestry of deceit. Yet the identity of the murderer remained elusive, hidden among the household's tangled motives. Poirot's grey cells, tireless and precise, were closing in on the truth, and he sensed that one false step by the killer would unravel the entire mystery. The discovery of the letters in the cellar's locked box had confirmed Mrs. Vane's affair with Hurst, a secret she had paid to bury years ago. The notes' references to lies now made sense. The first, her manipulation of Reginald's death to secure his fortune. The second, her hidden liaison, which threatened her reputation and her marriage. But who had known of both lies, and who had the cunning to poison her wine in a locked room? Poirot resolved to probe deeper, focusing on the night of the murder and the alibis that had been offered with such careful conviction. He began with the decanter, the vessel of death. The police analysis, relayed by Inspector Carver, confirmed that the cyanide had been added to the wine before it reached Mrs. Vane's chamber, likely in the dining room or cellar. The dining room, where the decanter had stood during dinner, was accessible to all Gerald, Clara, Hurst, Lydia, and even Hargreaves, the butler. But Lydia's testimony that she had poured the wine herself and delivered it to Mrs. Vane's locked room narrowed the window of opportunity. Had the poison been introduced earlier, or had someone tampered with the glass after Lydia's departure? The locked door and bolted window suggested an impossible crime, but Poirot knew that no crime was impossible, only misunderstood. He requested to re-examine the dining room, accompanied by Hargreaves, whose stoic demeanor seemed to mask a growing unease. The room was as it had been the night of the murder, the long mahogany table gleaming under the chandelier, the sideboard laden with silver and crystal. The decanter's usual place was marked by a faint ring on the polished wood, a silent witness to the crime. Poirot's keen eyes scanned the room, noting the placement of chairs, the distance from the table to the sideboard, the unobstructed view from the corridor. "Monsieur Hargreaves," he said, his voice soft but probing, "you are certain no?" One approached the decanter after it was filled. Hargreaves nodded, his face impassive. "I filled it myself, sir, from a bottle in the cellar. It stood on the sideboard during dinner, and Miss Crane took it to Mrs. Vane afterward. I saw no one near it." "And yet," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing, "Miss Crane mentioned seeing Dr. Hurst in this room late that evening, after dinner. Can you confirm this?" Hargreaves hesitated, a crack in his composure. I was in the servants' quarters. By then, sir, I cannot say what happened after dinner." Poirot's grey cells sparked. Lydia's observation of Hurst was a thread worth pulling. He thanked Hargreaves and requested Dr. Hurst's presence in the library. Hurst arrived promptly, his medical bag in hand, his calm facade as polished as ever. He sat, his hands folded, his grey eyes meeting Poirot's with a faint challenge. "Dr. Hurst," Poirot began, his tone deceptively mild, "you have told me you were in your room reading on the night of Madame Vane's death. Yet Miss Crane saw you near the dining room, close to the decanter, after dinner. This is most curious, Nan. Perhaps you can explain." Hurst's fingers twitched, but his voice remained steady. "Miss Crane is mistaken. I checked the house before retiring, as I often do when Mrs. Vane was anxious. I may have passed the dining room, but I did not enter it, nor did I touch the decanter." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "And yet, doctor, you have the knowledge to procure cyanide, and the motive, perhaps, in Madame Vane's past. The letters in the cellar, they confirm an affair between you and her, before her marriage, a secret she paid to keep hidden. Did she threaten to expose you, or did you seek to silence her?" Hurst's composure cracked, his face pulling. "An affair? That's absurd. I was her physician, nothing more. If there are letters, there are forgeries, or someone else's doing. I had no reason to harm her." Poirot produced the letters from his pocket, their yellowed pages damning in their intimacy. "These are in Madame Vane's hand, addressed to Dr. S.H. They speak of love, of secrecy. You deny this?" Hurst's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the letters. I admit there was a brief attachment, years ago, before she married Reginald. It ended amicably, and I never spoke of it. She paid Grayson to keep it quiet, but I had no part in that. I didn't kill her, Poirot. I swear it." Poirot's smile was thin. "Swearing is not proof, doctor. Your presence in the dining room, your knowledge of cyanide, your past with Madame Vane, these are threads that weave a troubling pattern. And there is more." He paused, his voice dropping. "In your medical bag, I found a vial hidden in a false compartment. It contained traces of cyanide." Hurst's eyes widened, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "That's impossible. I keep no such thing. Someone must have planted it." Poirot's grey cells hummed. The vial, discovered during a discreet Search of Hurst's room while he was questioned by Carver was a damning clue, but its placement felt too convenient. Was Hurst the murderer or a scapegoat? We shall see, Dr. Poirot said, dismissing him. The truth has a way of revealing itself. He turned to Lydia Crane next, summoning her to the library. Her severe black dress and tightly pinned hair gave her the air of a mourner, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. Miss Crane, Poirot said, you saw Dr. Hurst near the dining room. At what hour, and what was he doing? Lydia's lips pursed. It was near 10 o'clock, sir. I was checking the house before locking up. He was standing by the sideboard, looking at the decanter. I thought it odd, but he said he was ensuring all was in order. And you did not see him touch it? Poirot pressed. No, sir, but I didn't stay long. I had duties to attend to. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Lydia's testimony placed Hurst at the scene, but her own role in delivering the wine made her equally suspect. Miss Crane, you have served this family for decades. Did you know of Madame Vane's affair with Dr. Hurst? Lydia's expression hardened. I don't pry into my mistress's affairs, sir. If she had indiscretions, they were her business. But you knew, Poirot said softly. A housekeeper sees all, hears all. Did you find the letters, perhaps, and use them to threaten her? Lydia's eyes flashed. I'd never harm Mrs. Vane. She was good to me, whatever her faults. I know nothing of letters or poison. Poirot dismissed her, noting in his book, Lydia confirms Hurst's presence, fiercely loyal. Possible access to letters. He then called Clara Merton, whose tear-streaked face suggested genuine grief or a skilled performance. Mademoiselle, he said, you lingered near your aunt's door. Did you see Dr. Hurst or anyone else near her room that night? Clara shook her head, her voice trembling. No, I told you, I only heard her muttering. I didn't see anyone. I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't hurt her, and the affair. Poirot asked, did she confide in you about Dr. Hurst? Clara's eyes widened. Dr. Hurst, no. She never said a word, but she was always nervous around him, like she was hiding something. I thought it was about his dismissal, not that. Poirot noted her surprise, genuine or not, and dismissed her. Finally, he spoke to Gerald, whose agitation had grown, his sketchbook filled with increasingly violent images. Monsieur Vane, Poirot said, Dr. Hurst was seen near the decanter. Did you see him, or know of his affair with your stepmother? Gerald's laugh was bitter. Hurst and Eleanor. That explains a lot. She always favored him, kept him around even when he was useless. But I didn't see him that night. I was in my studio, like I said. Poirot showed him a sketch. The woman's face twisted in agony. This is your stepmother, Nan. A curious image for a man who claims innocence. Gerald flushed. It's art, not evidence. I hated her, but I didn't poison her. Poirot dismissed him, his notebook filling with observations. Hurst's alibi crumbles. Motive in affair and possible. Blackmail. Vile, suspicious. Clara grief or guilt. Gerald anger, but not calculated. Lydia key to truth. The cellar's locked box, the letters, and now Hurst's crumbling alibi pointed to a complex web. Hurst was the prime suspect, but the vials. Placement suggested a frame. Poirot's grey cells churned, sensing the murderer's misstep was near. The rain fell harder, and Vane Manor's secrets were close to breaking open. Chapter 7. The artist's confession, the rain had settled into a relentless rhythm, drumming against the leaded windows of Vane Manor as if urging its secrets to spill forth. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small frame a study in precision. Amidst the chaos of murder, the death of Mrs. Eleanor, Vane poisoned by cyanide in a locked room, had cast a pall over the household, and the threads of the mystery were tightening. The first lie, her falsification of Reginald Vane's death certificate, and the second, her concealed affair with Dr. Simon Hurst, had been uncovered. But the murderer's identity remained elusive. Dr. Hurst's crumbling alibi and the cyanide vial in his medical bag pointed to his guilt, yet Poirot's grey cells sensed a deeper complexity. The household Gerald Vane, Clara Merton, Lydia Crane, and Hurst himself each harboured motives, but the truth lay in their contradictions. Poirot's morning began with a visit to the manor's gardens, where he found Gerald Vane, the brooding artist, burning a pile of sketches in a small iron brazier. The air was thick with the acrid scent of charred paper, and Gerald's face, illuminated by the flickering flames, was a mask of agitation. His hands, stained with charcoal, trembled as he fed another drawing to the fierce sketch of a woman, her features contorted in a haunting echo of Mrs. Vane's final moments. Poirot's keen eyes missed nothing. The act of destruction was not merely artistic frustration, but a desperate attempt to erase evidence. "Monsieur Vane," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the patter of rain, "you destroy your work with such fervor. Is it the weight of grief, or perhaps of guilt, that drives you?" Gerald started, his dark eyes flashing with defiance. "What do you want, Poirot?" "I'm clearing out old sketches. They're no good, that's all." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the brazier, where a partially burned drawing revealed a noose around a woman's neck, her face unmistakably Mrs. Vane's. "No good, you say? Yet these images speak of anger, of vengeance. They depict your stepmother, Nan, a curious choice for an artist who claims innocence." Gerald's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. "They're just drawings. I hated her, I won't deny it. She stole my father's legacy, left me with nothing but this crumbling manor. But I didn't kill her. I'm not that kind of man." Poirot's smile was thin, his eyes unyielding. "And yet, monsieur, the threatening notes you will pay for your lies bear the mark of passion, of resentment. Did you write them, perhaps to frighten her, to make her pay for her deceptions?" Gerald's face paled, his defiance faltering. He tossed another sketch into the fire, watching it curl and blacken. "All right," he said, his voice low. "I wrote the notes. Both of them. I found out about her lies about my father's death certificate, how she faked it to grab his fortune. I was angry, Poirot. I wanted her to squirm, to know someone saw through her. But I swear I didn't poison her. I didn't even know about her affair with Hurst until you mentioned it." Poirot's grey cells sparked. Gerald's confession was a breakthrough, but it raised new questions. "The second note, monsieur, was found in Madame Bain's desk, hidden. How did it come to be there, if you wrote it?" Gerald hesitated, his eyes darting to the flames. I slipped it under her door a week ago. She must have hidden it. I didn't want her dead, just scared. I thought if she knew someone was onto her, she'd change the bail, polishing the will, give me back what's mine." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Gerald's admission explained the notes, but the hidden note suggested Mrs. Vane had concealed it, perhaps to protect herself or someone else. "You are certain you placed it under the door, not on her desk?" "I'm sure," Gerald snapped. I didn't have a key to her room. Someone else must have moved it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The locked room, the hidden note, the poison pointed to a calculated plan, and Gerald's impulsiveness seemed at odds with such precision. Merci, Monsieur Vane. Your candor is appreciated. But tell me, did you share your knowledge of the death certificate with anyone else? Gerald shook his head. No, I found the papers in the attic last month, in my father's old trunk. I kept it to myself, used it to write the notes. I didn't trust anyone here. Poirot dismissed him, noting in his book, Gerald admits to notes, motive in disinheritance, unlikely murderer, hidden note, problematic. The confession was a piece of the puzzle, but the murderer's hand was steadier, more cunning. Poirot turned his attention to Clara Merton, whose emotional volatility and financial dependence made her a suspect. Clara entered the library, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She wore a simple black dress, her usual vivacity extinguished. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice trembling, this is all so horrible. I can't believe Aunt Eleanor is gone. Poirot gestured to a chair, his expression gentle but probing. Mademoiselle, your aunt's death is a tragedy, but the truth must be found. Gerald has confessed to writing the threatening notes, driven by her falsification of your uncle's death certificate. Did you know of this lie? Clara's eyes widened, her hands twisting her handkerchief. Gerald wrote those notes. I had no idea. I knew he was angry about the will, but the death certificate, no, she never told me. But I overheard her arguing with Mr. Travers once, about some legal trouble. I thought it was about money. Poirot leaned forward. And the affair with Dr. Hurst. Did you suspect anything? Clara's cheeks flushed. I told you, she was nervous around him, but I didn't know why. Now it makes sense. She was always so proper, but there were moments, glances, silences that felt wrong. I thought she was just strict. And the night of the murder, Poirot pressed. You were near her door. Did you hear or see anything unusual? Clara's voice broke. I told you. I heard her muttering, scared. I knocked, but she told me to go away. I went to my room and cried myself to sleep. I didn't see anyone else. Poirot noted her distress, genuine or performed. Clara claims ignorance of lies. Emotional, possible blackmail. Her story held, but her proximity to the crime scene was troubling. Dr. Hurst was next, his calm demeanor fraying at the edges. He sat stiffly, his hands clasped tightly. Monsieur Poirot, he said, I've told you everything. The vial in my bag was planted. I had no reason to kill her. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And yet, Doctor, your affair with Madame Vane was a secret she paid to keep buried. Gerald's notes exposed her first lie. Did you fear exposure of the second? Hurst's face hardened. The affair was over years ago. I had no reason to harm her. Someone framed me, Poirot. Check the vial for fingerprints. It won't have mine. Poirot's grey cells hummed. The vial's convenient placement suggested a setup, but Hurst's expertise and opportunity were undeniable. Hurst's motive in affair, access to cyanide, framed. Lydia Crane entered last, her severe expression unyielding. Miss Crane, Poirot said, Gerald admits to the notes, but the second was hidden in Madame Vane's desk. Did you place it there? Lydia's eyes flashed. No, sir, I told you. I delivered the wine and left. I never saw the second note, and the affair. Poirot asked, You knew, did you not? Lydia's lips thinned. I suspected. I Saw them together once, years ago, in the garden, but it was none of my business. I never spoke of it." Poirot dismissed her, noting, "Lydia possible knowledge of affair, access to room, loyal or complicit." The confession had shifted the puzzle, but the hidden note and the cyanide pointed to a killer with access to Mrs. Vane's private chamber. Poirot's grey cells churned, sensing the murderer's mask was slipping. The rain fell harder, and Vane Manor's secrets were on the verge of exposure. Chapter 8. The housekeeper's silence. The rain had relented by late afternoon, leaving Vane Manor steeped in a heavy, expectant silence, as if the very stones held their breath. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small, meticulous figure, a beacon of order amidst the chaos of murder. The death of Mrs. Eleanor Vane, poisoned by cyanide in a locked room, had cast a net of suspicion over the household. Gerald Vane's confession to writing the threatening notes, "You will pay for your lies, and your first lie will not save," had clarified their origin, rooted in his discovery of Mrs. Vane's falsified death certificate for her husband. Reginald, the second lie, her concealed affair with Dr. Simon Hurst, had added another layer to the mystery. Yet the murderer's identity remained elusive, hidden behind a facade of alibis and half-truths. Poirot's grey cells, relentless in their precision, were drawn to Lydia Crane, the housekeeper, whose silence seemed to guard a deeper truth. The library, with its towering bookshelves and the faint scent of aged leather, was Poirot's sanctuary for thought. He reviewed his notes, the pages filled with observations of the household's tangled motives: Gerald's anger, Clara's desperation, Hurst's compromised alibi, and Lydia's impenetrable reserve. The cyanide in the decanter, the locked room, the hidden note in Mrs. Vane's desk all pointed to someone with intimate access to the manor's routines. Lydia, with her master key and decades of service, was uniquely positioned to know its secrets. Her claim of loyalty to Mrs. Vane was convincing, yet her reticence suggested she was shielding something or someone. Poirot resolved to confront her, sensing that her silence was the key to unlocking the second lie's full implications. He requested her presence in the kitchen, a domain where Lydia's authority was absolute. The room was a hive of order, its copper pots gleaming, its surfaces scrubbed to a mirror-like sheen. Lydia stood at the long oak table, polishing silver. With mechanical precision, her severe black dress and tightly pinned grey hair giving her the air of a sentinel. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, met Poirot's as he entered, betraying no surprise at his request. "Miss Crane," Poirot began, his voice soft but incisive, "you have served the Vane family for many years, observing all that passes within these walls. The murder of Madame Vane was a calculated act, and I believe you know more than you have revealed. Will you speak, or must Hercule Poirot unravel your silence?" Lydia's hands paused, the silver spoon in her grip catching the light. "I've told you what I know, sir," she said, her tone clipped. "I brought Mrs. Vane her wine, locked her door, and left. I had no part in her death." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes fixed on hers. "And yet, mademoiselle, you are the eyes and ears of this house. You knew of her affair with Dr. Hurst, did you not? You saw them in the garden years ago. Did you also know of the letters hidden in the cellar that confirmed their liaison?" Lydia's lips thinned, her fingers tightening on the spoon. "I told you, I suspected something, but it wasn't my place to pry. Those letters, I never saw them. If they were in the cellar, someone else hid them there." Poirot's grey cells hummed. Her denial was too precise, too practiced. You have a master key, Miss Crane. You could enter Madame Vane's room at any time. The second note, found in her desk, was hidden, yet Gerald claims he slipped it under her door. Did you move it, perhaps to protect her, or to conceal your own knowledge? Lydia's eyes flashed, a rare crack in her composure. I never touched her desk. I respected her privacy, always. If that note was moved, it wasn't by me. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Very well, but let us speak of another matter. You overheard Madame Vane arguing with Dr. Hurst, did you not? About a past indiscretion. What did you hear, and why have you kept it silent? Lydia set the spoon down, her hands folding tightly in her lap. I heard them in the drawing room, a week before her death. She was angry, saying he had no right to bring up the past. He said something about reputation and payment. I didn't stay to listen, it wasn't my place. Poirot's mind raced. Hurst's blackmail, hinted at in the letters and Travers's account, was confirmed. But Lydia's selective silence suggested she was protecting someone, Mrs. Vane, perhaps, or herself. And you told no one of this argument? He pressed. No, sir, Lydia replied, her voice steady. Mrs. Vane was good to me. I owed her my loyalty, not my gossip. Poirot's smile was faint. Loyalty is a noble trait, Miss Crane, but it can shield a murderer. If you know more, you must speak, or the truth will find you regardless. Lydia's gaze held his, unyielding. I've said all I will, sir. I had no hand in her death. Poirot dismissed her, but his suspicion lingered. Her access to the manor, her knowledge of its routines, and her guarded demeanor made her a pivotal figure. He resolved to search her quarters, suspecting she might hold evidence of the affair or the murder. With Inspector Carver's permission, he conducted a discreet search while Lydia was occupied with the household staff. Her room, tucked in the servants' wing, was as austere as her demeanor. A narrow bed, a plain wardrobe, a small desk. But hidden beneath a loose floorboard, Poirot found a diary, its pages filled with Lydia's precise script. The entries were sparse, detailing household duties, but one, dated a month prior, caught his eye. Mrs. V. argued with Dr. H again. He threatens to tell all her shame, his ruin. She begs him to stay silent, offers money. I cannot bear her distress, but I must not interfere. Another entry, from the week of the murder, read, she burns papers in the fire, says it's the only way. I see the fear in her eyes. God, forgive us all. Poirot's grey cells sparked. The diary confirmed Lydia's knowledge of the affair and Hurst's blackmail. But it also suggested Mrs. Vane's desperation to erase her past. Had she burned the missing envelope from her desk, or had someone else taken it? Lydia's loyalty was clear, but was it to Mrs. Vane's memory, or to her own secrets? He confronted Lydia again in the library, the diary in hand. Miss Crane, he said, holding it up, this tells a different story. You knew of Dr. Hurst's threats, of Madame Vane's fear. Why did you not speak of this? Lydia's face paled, her hands trembling. That's private, sir. You had no right to take it. I wrote what I saw, but I didn't act on it. I loved Mrs. Vane like a sister. I'd never harm her. And yet, Poirot said, his voice soft but relentless, you withheld this from me. You saw her burn papers, saw her fear. Did you know what she burned? Lydia shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. Letters, I think. She said they were from a time she regretted. I didn't ask more. I couldn't. Poirot dismissed her, noting, Lydia Diary confirms knowledge of blackmail, loyalty to Mrs. Vane, protector or accomplice. The housekeeper's silence was a shield, but for whom? He turned his attention to the dining room, where the decanter had been poisoned. A closer inspection revealed a faint scratch on the sideboard, suggesting something had been moved to tray, perhaps, or a hidden vial. He questioned Hargreaves, who admitted to noticing a small silver tray missing from the dining room the morning after the murder. The tray, found later in the cellar, bore traces of cyanide, confirmed by Poirot's chemical strip. It had been used to transport the poison, likely placed near the decanter during dinner. Lydia's access to the dining room, her master key, and her knowledge of Hurst's blackmail made her a suspect. But her devotion to Mrs. Vane suggested another possibility. She had discovered the poison and remained silent to protect someone else. Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room that evening, their faces drawn with fatigue and fear. Gerald's sketches lay scattered. Clara's eyes were red. Hurst's calm was brittle, and Lydia stood apart, her silence a wall. "Mies, Amos," Poirot said, "the truth draws near." The notes were Gerald's, the affair was Hurst's, but the murder was another's design. Someone used the lies to mask their motive. "I will find them." His grey cells churned, the puzzle nearly complete. Lydia's silence was the key, but whether it shielded her guilt or another's, only time would tell. The manor's shadows deepened, and Poirot knew the final revelation was close. Chapter 9. The locked room unlocked. The rain had ceased, leaving Vane Manor cloaked in a damp stillness, the air heavy with the scent of wet stone and fading roses. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small frame a pillar of precision amidst the turmoil of murder. The death of Mrs. Eleanor Vane, poisoned by cyanide in a locked room, had woven a web of deception that ensnared the entire household. Gerald Vane's confession to writing the threatening notes had clarified their origin. Rooted in his discovery of Mrs. Vane's falsified death certificate for her husband, Reginald, the second lie, her concealed affair with Dr. Simon Hurst, had been confirmed by letters found in the cellar and Lydia Crane's diary, which revealed Hurst's blackmail. Yet the murderer's identity remained elusive, hidden behind a locked door and a poisoned decanter. Poirot's grey cells, relentless in their pursuit of order, were poised to unravel the final threads of the mystery. The locked room had been the puzzle's heart from the moment Poirot entered Mrs. Vane's chamber and found her lifeless, the wineglass spilled beside her, the faint scent of almonds betraying cyanide. The door had been locked from the inside, the window bolted, and Lydia's testimony that she had delivered the wine and locked the door at 9 o'clock seemed unassailable. Yet Poirot knew that no crime was impossibly misunderstood. The cyanide in the decanter, confirmed by Inspector Carver's analysis, suggested the poison was introduced before it reached Mrs. Vane's room, likely in the dining room or cellar. The silver tray, found in the cellar with traces of cyanide, was a crucial clue indicating how the poison had been transported. But how had it been administered in a locked room, and by whom? Poirot began the day by reconstructing the murder. Retracing the decanter's journey, he returned to the dining room, its long mahogany table and glittering chandelier now somber in the grey light. The sideboard, where the decanter had stood during dinner, bore the faint scratch he had noted. Earlier mark of the tray's movement. He summoned Hargreaves, the butler, whose impassive face betrayed a flicker of unease, as Poirot questioned him again. "Monsieur Hargreaves," Poirot said, his voice calm but piercing, "you filled the decanter from a bottle in the cellar, and it remained on the sideboard during dinner. Miss Crane took it to Madame Vane's room, but the tray, found in the cellar with traces of cyanide, suggests someone used it to carry the poison. Did you see anyone near the sideboard after dinner? Hargreaves shook his head, his hands clasped tightly. No, sir, I cleared the table after dinner and retired to the servants' quarters. Miss Crane handled the decanter from then on. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the tray? It was missing the next morning, you said. Who had access to it? Anyone in the household, sir? Hargreaves admitted. It was kept on the sideboard, used for serving drinks. I didn't notice it missing until you asked. Poirot dismissed him, his mind turning to the tray's significance. The cyanide had been transported on it, likely poured into the decanter, during a moment of distraction, but the locked room remained the puzzle's core. He returned to Mrs. Vane's chamber, now unsealed by the police, and examined it with meticulous care. The door's lock was sturdy, its key still in Mrs. Vane's possession when she died. The window's bolt was intact, the frame unmarred. The wine glass, tested by Carver's men, bore only Mrs. Vane's fingerprints, suggesting she had poured the wine herself. Yet the decanter's poison pointed to an earlier act. A sudden insight struck Poirot as he stood by the bedside table, where the decanter had been placed. Mrs. Vane had a habit, mentioned in passing by Clara, of sweetening her wine with a sugar cube from a small silver bowl kept in her room. Poirot examined the bowl, its delicate engravings catching the light. He requested a chemical test from Carver, who arrived with a portable kit. The results were swift. Traces of cyanide in the sugar cubes. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his grey cells alight. The locked room was a misdirection. The poison was not in the wine, but in the sugar cube, laced with cyanide and placed in the bowl before Mrs. Vane retired. She had locked the door herself, unaware of the deadly trap. The murderer needed only access to her private sugar bowl, a task requiring intimate knowledge of her habits. Poirot summoned Lydia Crane, whose role in delivering the wine and maintaining the room made her a key figure. She entered the library, her severe black dress and tightly pinned hair as unyielding as her demeanor. Miss Crane, Poirot said, you prepared Madame Vane's room each evening, including her sugar bowl. Did you notice anything unusual about it on the night of her death? Lydia's eyes flickered, but her voice was steady. No, sir. I filled the bowl as always, from the kitchen supply. I left it on her bedside table and locked the door. And who else had access to that bowl? Poirot pressed, his gaze unwavering. No one, sir, Lydia replied. The bowl was kept in her room, and only I or Mrs. Vane handled it. The kitchen sugar is stored in a locked pantry, and I have the key. Poirot's grey cells churned. Lydia's access was undeniable, but her loyalty to Mrs. Vane seemed genuine. Had someone else tampered with the bowl, or was Lydia concealing her role? He dismissed her and turned to Dr. Hurst, whose crumbling alibi and connection to the affair made him the prime suspect. Hurst entered, his calm facade strained, his hands clasped tightly. Monsieur Poirot, he said, I've told you, the vial in my bag was planted. I had no reason to kill her. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. Doctor, the poison was in the sugar cube, not the wine. You knew of Madame Vane's habit, did you not? And your affair, your blackmail did. She threatened to expose you, prompting you to silence her. Hurst's face paled, his voice rising. Sugar cube. I didn't know she used them. And I told you, the affair was over years ago. I didn't blackmail her, Grayson did. If anyone poisoned her, it was someone else in this house. Poirot noted the desperation in Hurst's voice, but his expertise and presence near the dining room were damning. Hurst's knowledge of habits, access to cyanide, guilty or framed. He dismissed him and called Clara and Gerald, probing their knowledge of the sugar bowl. Clara admitted knowing of her aunt's habit, but claimed she never touched the bowl. Gerald, still shaken by his confession, denied any knowledge, his sketches now locked away as if to hide his guilt. Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room, the air thick with tension. Gerald's eyes were hollow, Clara's hands trembled. Hurst's calm was brittle, and Lydia stood apart, her silence a fortress. Mes amis, Poirot said, his voice resonant. The locked room is unlocked. The poison was in a sugar cube, placed in Madame Vane's bowl. The murderer is among you, and I, Hercule Poirot, declare it is Dr. Hurst. Hurst's face contorted, his voice a snarl. That's preposterous. I didn't touch her sugar. You've no proof. Poirot held up a hand. You had motive. Her affair threatened your reputation. You had opportunities seen near the dining room, where the tray was moved, and you had means the cyanide vial in your bag. The sugar bowl was tampered with, and you knew her habits. Hurst shook his head, his eyes wild. I'm innocent. Someone framed me. Poirot's grey cells hummed. The vial's placement was suspicious, but Hurst's guilt fit the evidence. Yet Lydia's silence, her access to the bowl, lingered in his mind. The truth was near, and Poirot knew the final confrontation would reveal it. The manor's shadows deepened, but the light of his grey cells would soon illuminate the killer. Chapter 10. The Final Confrontation. The evening light filtered weakly through the heavy drapes of Vane Manor's drawing room, casting long shadows across the faces of its inhabitants. The air was thick with tension, as if the very walls braced for the revelation that Hercule Poirot was about to unveil. The murder of Mrs. Eleanor Vane, poisoned by cyanide in a locked room, had unraveled a tapestry of deceit. Her falsified death certificate for her husband Reginald, the first lie, and her concealed affair with Dr. Simon Hurst, the second. Gerald Bain's confession to writing the threatening notes had clarified their origin, but the cyanide-laced sugar cube, the locked door, and Lydia Crane's guarded silence had pointed Poirot toward Dr. Hurst as the prime suspect. Yet his grey cells, ever vigilant, sensed a final twist in the puzzle. The truth was near, and the drawing room would be its stage. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small frame commanding attention, his meticulously groomed mustache a stark contrast to the chaos of the moment. Before him sat the household, Gerald Vane, his charcoal-stained hands clutching a sketchbook, his eyes hollow with defiance. Clara Merton, her face pale, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Dr. Simon Hurst, his calm facade cracked, his hands gripping the arms of his chair, and Lydia Crane, standing apart, her severe expression a fortress of silence. Inspector Carver and his constable stood by the door, their presence a quiet reminder of the law's weight. The rain had stopped, but the manor's oppressive stillness seemed to pulse with anticipation. Mes amis, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. We are gathered to unmask the murderer of Madame Eleanor Vane. Her death was no accident, but a calculated act woven from the threads of her lies. The first lie, her falsification of Reginald Vane's death certificate, enriched her, but sowed resentment. The second, her affair with Dr. Hurst, threatened her reputation and sparked blackmail. The threatening notes, written by Monsieur Gerald, were a cry of anger, but the poison in the sugar cube was the work of a colder mind. I have said it is Dr. Hurst, but let us examine the truth with order and method. Hurst's face darkened, his voice rising. This is outrageous. Poirot, I've told you, the vial in my bag was planted. I had no reason to kill her. Poirot raised a hand, his eyes gleaming. Patience, doctor. Let us reconstruct the crime. Madame Vane was poisoned by cyanide in a sugar cube, placed in her private bowl, which she used to sweeten her wine. The locked room was a misdirection. She locked the door herself, unaware. Of the poison, the murderer needed only access to her sugar bowl, a task requiring intimate knowledge of her habits. You, doctor, knew of her routine, had motive in her affair, and were seen near the dining room, where the silver tray bearing traces of cyanide was moved. Hurst leapt to his feet, his composure shattered. I didn't touch her sugar. I wasn't in her room. Someone framed me, I tell you. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lydia, whose silence seemed to deepen. Miss Crane, you prepared the sugar bowl each evening. You had the master key, access to the pantry, and knowledge of Madame Vane's habits. Your diary revealed her fear, her burning of papers. Did you place the cyanide, perhaps to protect her from Hurst's blackmail? Lydia's eyes flashed, her voice steady but strained. I loved Mrs. Vane. I'd never harm her. I filled the bowl from the pantry, as always. If there was poison, someone else put it there. Poirot nodded, his grey cells churning. Indeed, the pantry is key. The sugar was stored there, locked, with only you and Hargreaves holding keys. But let us consider another possibility. He turned to Clara, whose hands trembled. Mademoiselle Merton, you knew of your aunt's sugar habit. You lingered near her door, desperate for money. Did you discover the affair, perhaps, and use it to threaten her? Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. No, I loved Aunt Eleanor, even if she was strict. I didn't know about the affair until you said it. I never touched her sugar. Poirot's gaze returned to Gerald, whose sketches lay scattered on the table, their dark images a mirror of his anger. Monsieur Vane, you admitted to the notes, driven by your stepmother's first lie. But did you know of the second her affiant seek to punish her with poison? Gerald's laugh was bitter, his hands clenching his sketchbook. I told you, I wrote the notes to scare her, not kill her. I didn't know about Hurst or her sugar. You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. Poirot stepped forward, his voice rising with certainty. Nan, Mies, Amos, the tree is the right one, but the branches are tangled. Let us untangle them. The cyanide vial in Dr. Hurst's bag was too convenient, its placement a deliberate frame. The sugar bowl was the key, and only one person had the means, motive, and opportunity to poison it. He paused, his eyes locking onto Hurst. Doctor, you protested your innocence, but the evidence is clear. You blackmailed Madame Vane, threatening to reveal your affair. She refused to pay further, and you, fearing exposure, laced her sugar cube with cyanide, knowing her habit. You were seen near the dining room, where the tray was used to transport the poison. The vial was planted, yes, but by you, to deflect suspicion. Hurst's face contorted, his voice a snarl. You're mad. I didn't blackmail her. Grayson did, years ago. I had no cyanide, no reason to kill her. Poirot's smile was cold. But you did, Doctor. The letters in the cellar, your presence. Near the tray, your knowledge of her habits all point to you. And Lydia's diary confirms your threats. You demanded money, and when she refused, you acted. The locked room was your shield, but it has been unlocked. Hurst lunged forward, his hands raised, but Carver's constable restrained him. I'm innocent, he shouted. Check the vial, my fingerprints aren't on it. Poirot held up a hand. They are not, Doctor, because you were careful. But the tray bears traces of your touch, and the pantry's lock shows signs of tampering. You had access, through your long tenure here, to learn its secrets. Hurst's shoulders slumped, his voice dropping to a whisper. All right, I blackmailed her. She was going to ruin me, tell everyone about the affair. I couldn't let her. I got the cyanide from a colleague, slipped it into the sugar when Lydia was distracted. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted her to pay. The room fell silent. Clara sobbed the only sound. Gerald's face was grim. Lydia's eyes filled with tears. And Carver nodded to his constable, who led Hurst away in handcuffs. Poirot's grey cells settled, the puzzle complete. The notes were Gerald's, the affair was Hurst's motive, and the sugar cube was his method. Lydia's silence had protected her mistress's memory, but it had not shielded the truth. Mise Amos, Poirot said, his voice softening. The lies of Madame Vane brought her tragedy, but the truth has brought justice. Let us hope her soul finds peace. The drawing room emptied, leaving Poirot alone with his thoughts. The manor's shadows seemed lighter, the air less heavy. The final confrontation had revealed the killer, and Vane Manor's secrets were laid bare. But Poirot knew another mystery awaited, and his grey cells were ever ready. Chapter 11. The widow's legacy. The rain had returned to Vane Manor by mid-morning, a soft drizzle that veiled the estate in a mournful haze, as if nature itself grieved for the tragedy that had unfolded. Hercule Poirot stood at the library window, his small, impeccable figure framed against the grey light, his hands clasped behind his back. The murder of Mrs. Eleanor Vane, poisoned by cyanide in a locked room, had been solved. Dr. Simon Hurst, driven by the threat of exposure over their past affair, had laced her sugar cube with poison. His blackmail turned deadly. Gerald Vane's threatening notes, born of resentment over his stepmother's falsified death certificate, had been a distraction, and Lydia Crane's silence had shielded her mistress's secrets until the end. Yet Poirot's grey cells, though satisfied with the resolution, lingered on the aftermath, sensing that Mrs. Vane's legacy held one final revelation. The household was subdued, the air heavy with the weight of justice served. Gerald Vane had retreated to his studio, his sketches now turned to landscapes, as if to purge the dark images of his stepmother. Clara Merton, her vivacity dimmed, moved through the manor like a ghost, her eyes red from tears. Lydia Crane, ever the stoic housekeeper, resumed her duties with mechanical precision, though her severe expression softened with a private grief. Inspector Carver had departed with Dr. Hurst in custody, the constable's report noting the doctor's confession as sufficient for a conviction. But Poirot, ever meticulous, requested one final meeting with Mr. Travers, the family solicitor, to clarify the consequences of Mrs. Vane's lies. Travers arrived promptly, his wiry frame hunched against the drizzle, his spectacles fogged as he entered the library. He carried his familiar briefcase, its contents a testament to the legal intricacies of the Vane estate. Monsieur Poirot, he said, settling into a chair, I understand you've solved this dreadful affair. Dr. Hurst, such a shock. How may I assist you now? Poirot seated himself at the desk, his notebook open, though his grey cells needed no prompting. Monsieur Travers, the murder is resolved, but the legacy of Madame Vane remains. Her lies to falsified death certificate and the concealed affair have torn this household apart. I wish to understand her final wishes, the disposition of her estate. There was a codicil to her will, you said. What does it reveal? Travers opened his briefcase, producing a sheaf of documents bound in black ribbon. Indeed, Monsieur Poirot, Mrs. Vane's will, as I mentioned, directed the bulk of her estate to the Orphans' Fund, a decision that angered Gerald and Clara. But the codicil signed a month before her death adjusts this. It restores a modest inheritance to both Gerald and Clara, £10,000 each, a significant sum but far less than they hoped. The manor itself and the remaining fortune still go to the charity. Poirot's eyes gleamed, a gesture of atonement, perhaps, for the lies that cost her family's trust. Travers nodded, his fingers adjusting his spectacles. I believe so. She spoke of guilt in our last meeting, saying she wished to make amends. She knew Gerald resented her for the death certificate, though she never admitted it to me. As for Clara, she felt responsible for her niece's dependence, wanting to give her a fresh start. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. And was there anything else, monsieur? Any other documents, perhaps related to the affair with Dr. Hurst, that she wished to protect? Travers hesitated, his hands tightening on the briefcase. There was one item, mentioned in passing, a sealed envelope kept in her desk, which she instructed me to destroy upon her death. She said it contained personal letters, nothing of legal consequence. I haven't found it, so I assume she burned it, as Miss Crane noted in her diary. Poirot's grey cells stirred. The missing envelope, noted in Mrs. Vane's desk before her death, was likely the one she had burned, as Lydia had observed. But its absence confirmed her desperation to erase her past. Merci, Monsieur Travers. This clarifies much. The widow's lies shaped her legacy, but her final act was one of reconciliation. Travers departed, leaving Poirot to reflect. He summoned Gerald and Clara to the library, sensing they deserved to know the truth of their inheritance. Gerald entered first, his posture less defiant, his sketchbook absent. Clara followed, her black dress a stark contrast to her usual vibrancy. Mes amis, Poirot began, his voice gentle. The murder of Madame Vane was a tragedy born of her lies. But her final wishes show a heart seeking forgiveness. Her will, altered by a codicil, grants you each £10,000. The manor and the bulk of the estate pass to the Orphans' Fund, but she wished to ease your burdens. Gerald's eyes widened, his voice gruff. 10,000, after everything she took from me, it's something, I suppose. Enough to leave this cursed place. Clara's hands trembled, tears spilling. She thought of me, even after I pressured her for money. Oh, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't deserve her kindness. Poirot's smile was compassionate. The human heart is complex, mademoiselle. Her lies caused pain, but her love for you both endured. Use this legacy wisely. They left, Gerald's steps lighter, Clara's sobs quieter. Poirot turned to Lydia, who had entered silently, her hands clasped before her. Miss Crane, he said, you protected Madame Vane's secrets to the end. Her legacy is safe, thanks to your silence. Lydia's eyes met his, a rare softness in them. She was flawed, sir, but she was good to me. I couldn't betray her, even in death. Poirot nodded, his grey cells at rest. The widow's legacy was not only her wealth, but the truth of her heart, a woman who lied twice, yet sought redemption in her final days. The manor, soon to be a haven for orphans, would carry her name forward, cleansed of its shadows. Poirot closed his notebook, the case complete, and prepared to depart, his mind already turning to the next mystery awaiting his grey cells. Chapter 12. The return to London. The drizzle had lifted, and a pale sun broke through the clouds, casting a tentative light over Vane Manor as Hercule Poirot prepared to depart. The grand estate, with its ivy-clad walls and stern ancestral portraits, seemed to exhale a sigh of relief, its secrets laid bare by the relentless workings of Poirot's grey cells. The murder of Mrs. Eleanor Vane, poisoned by cyanide in a locked room, had been solved. Dr. Simon Hurst, driven by the fear of exposure over their past affair, had laced her sugar cube with poison, his blackmail turned deadly. Gerald Vane's threatening notes, sparked by the widow's falsified death certificate, and Lydia Crane's steadfast silence had woven a complex web, but Poirot had untangled it with precision. The widow's legacy, a modest inheritance for Gerald and Clara, and the manor to a charitable cause, had closed the case. But its echoes lingered in Poirot's mind as he readied himself for the return to London. The morning was crisp, the air carrying the faint scent of damp earth and blooming roses from the manor's gardens. Poirot stood in the entrance hall, his travelling case packed with the meticulous care of his valet, George, who had been summoned to collect him. His black suit was immaculate, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his moustache perfectly symmetrical, a testament to his unyielding commitment to order. Hargreaves, the butler, stood by the door, his impassive face softened by a rare nod of respect. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "the car is ready. We are grateful for your resolution." Poirot inclined his head, his eyes bright. "Merci, Monsieur Hargreaves. The truth is a stern master, but it brings peace to a house such as this." As he waited for the car, Poirot's thoughts turned to the household he was leaving behind. Gerald Vane, his anger tempered by the unexpected inheritance, had retreated to his studio, sketching landscapes that hinted at a new beginning. Clara Merton, her vivacity subdued but her future secured, had spoken of returning to London, her tears giving way to tentative hope. Lydia Crane, the silent sentinel, had resumed her duties, her loyalty to Mrs. Vane unbroken even in death. The manor itself, soon to be transformed into an orphanage, would carry forward Mrs. Vane's name, cleansed of the stains of her lies. Poirot's final meeting with Inspector Carver had been brief but cordial, the inspector, initially skeptical of the fancy foreigner, had conceded Poirot's brilliance, promising to oversee Dr. Hurst's prosecution. The cyanide vial, the poisoned sugar cube, and Hurst's confession formed an airtight case, though Poirot's grey cells lingered on the missing envelope from Mrs. Vane's desk. Likely burned, as Lydia's diary suggested, it had held the last remnants of her secrets, now reduced to ash. The widow who lied twice had paid the ultimate price, but her final act of atonement had softened the blow for those she left behind. The Rolls-Royce purred into view, its polished exterior a stark contrast to the manor's weathered grandeur. Poirot stepped into the car, settling into the plush leather seat, his notebook tucked into his pocket. The drive to Ashford Vale station was quiet, the Sussex countryside unfolding in a patchwork of green fields and ancient oaks. Poirot's mind, however, was far from idle. The case of Vane Manor had tested his grey cells, demanding not only logic but an understanding of the human heart, its capacity for deceit, resentment, and, ultimately, redemption. At the station, Poirot boarded the train to London, choosing a first-class compartment where he could reflect in solitude. He opened his notebook, its pages a testament to the case's complexity. Gerald's notes, Hurst's blackmail, Lydia's silence, the sugar cubes, deadly secret. He added a final entry. Madame Vane, her lies sow discord, but her legacy seeks peace. The truth, as always, prevails. Closing the notebook, he leaned back, his eyes half closed, and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The puzzle was complete, the murderer unmasked, and order restored. As the train rattled toward London, Poirot sipped a tisane, its warmth a comfort against the lingering chill of the case. The city's familiar spires soon came into view, their outlines sharp against the evening sky. His flat in Whitehaven Mansions awaited, its orderly elegance a sanctuary for his restless mind. George would have a fire lit, the silver polished, the cushions arranged just so. Poirot smiled, adjusting his moustache with a precise flick of his fingers. The world was a labyrinth of mysteries, each a challenge to his grey cells, and he, Hercule Poirot, was ever ready to meet them. The train slowed, and Poirot gathered his belongings, his thoughts already drifting to the next enigma. Vane Manor was behind him, its secrets laid to rest, but London pulsed with new puzzles, new lies, new truths. He stepped onto the platform, his small frame erect, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. The widow who lied twice had been a formidable adversary, but the truth had prevailed, as it always did under Poirot's watchful gaze. With a final glance at the fading countryside, he turned toward the city, ready for whatever mystery awaited. The end.